A coup against Erdogan is brutally put down by the president's loyalists. 300 were killed, more than 40,000 people detained by Erdogan's forces. Jump to May 2018. Erdogan's reputation as a strongman further emblazoned when his security detail attacks U.S. citizens protesting outside the Turkish embassy. Their goonish attack suggested a level of antagonism and unsophistication which seemed to stick with Erdogan. December 2019. Erdogan, being heavily criticized in the Western press, angers Washington by signing a deal with Russia to buy its coveted S-400 missile defense system. Later that same month, in 2019, the U.S. strikes back at Erdogan, threatening to sanction Turkey for cozying up to Russia and buying its said defense system. Then, as 2019 comes to a close, Erdogan returns fire on the U.S. He threatens to kick the U.S. out of its own base in eastern Turkey. The base is one of the U.S.'s most strategically important position in the world, with the capability of deploying nuclear warheads. Then, on the second day of this new year, 2020, Turkey sends troops into Libya, vying for the oil-rich nation's reserves that is said to be some of the best quality crude in the world. And finally, just as the world starts to notice Turkey's military expansionism, they do it again. This time, Turkish troops go into the Idlib province in Syria in a direct confrontation with Syrian troops, knowing it would not sit well with his supposed ally, President Putin. Interesting stuff. That's how we got to where we are today. But now what we want to do is try and give you a glimpse of what's actually going on the ground there in Syria. Here is Yulia Shapovalova reporting for us tonight.
The Turkish and Syrian military entered into direct confrontation in the province of Idlib. According to journalists on the ground, the operation was carried out in the village of Nayrab. A column of Turkish military equipment, including several tanks, headed towards this small city. In addition, artillery strikes were reported. According to the first data, both Turkish soldiers and fighters of the armed opposition were participating in the offensive. According to observers, as a result of the first battle near Nayrab, 2 tanks of the Syrian army were destroyed. A video also appeared on the network showing the shelling of the Syrian army by Turkish rocket artillery. According to the Russian Center for Reconciliation in Syria, Turkish-supported militants were able to break through the defenses of the Syrian government forces. In response, the Syrian side has requested assistance, so several Su-24 Russian airborne fighters were scrambled and hit the militants, destroying a tank, 6 infantry fighting vehicles and 5 pickup trucks with large-caliber weapons that allowed the Syrian forces to repel the attack.
To prevent militants from moving deeper into Syrian territory, Su-24 aircraft of the Russian Air Force, at the request of the Syrian command, have carried out airstrikes against the advancing armed terror groups. This allowed the Syrian troops to successfully repel all attacks.
The Center for Reconciliation also said that during the shelling, 4 soldiers of the Syrian government army had been injured. At the same time, the Turkish Ministry of Defense reported on the killing of 50 Syrian soldiers. Meanwhile, the Turkish Defense Department reported the deaths of 2 Turkish military personnel. 5 more were wounded. President Erdogan said that happened as a result of a strike by the Syrian Air Force. On February 19th, Mr. Erdogan announced his readiness to conduct a military operation in Syrian Idlib. According to him, the beginning of the operation was only a matter of time.
The Idlib operation is imminent. In particular, we will not leave Idlib to the regime, which has not yet understood our country's determination on this issue and those who are encouraging it. We are committed to making Idlib a safe place for both Turkey and the people of the region at all costs.
Washington expressed support to Turkey, which is its NATO ally. The Turkish leader also noted he was dissatisfied with the negotiations with Russia on the settlement of the conflict, since they had not brought the desired results. The situation in Idlib escalated in January when the Syrian army, in spite of the ceasefire initiated by Russia and Turkey earlier, intensified actions against militants in Idlib. Groups of the armed opposition and those whom Damascus considered terrorists concentrated there. As a result of the offensive by mid-February, the Syrian government forces forces managed to occupy almost half of the Idlib de-escalation zone and leave Turkish observation posts behind. However, such an advance outraged Ankara. In response, more than 100 targets were attacked and militants shot down 2 Syrian helicopters in the sky above Idlib. According to Moscow, Turkey is not able to separate the armed opposition, which is ready for dialogue, including the Syrian Free Army, from the terrorists. Moreover, extremists continue to attack the Syrian military and civilian areas outside the Idlib zone and also trying to strike at the Russian base of Hmeimim. Secondly, hundreds of fighters from terrorist groups are moving to Libya, where Turkey is also involved in hostilities. That's according to Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. So the situation remains tense, plus all that looks like a new aggravation between Russia and Turkey. Yulia Shapovalova for the news with Rick Sanchez.
So that's the picture, and now there's one more caveat that we want to share with you. We learn that Turkey is now threatening to use the very same S-400 weapons sold to it by Russia in this battle, supposedly against Russia and Syrian troops in Idlib. Wow. Joining us here now on the set is former Pentagon official Michael Maloof to try and bring us up to date. You know, it seems like every day it's Erdogan, Erdogan, Erdogan. Does he have no limits?
I think he does, and I think he's going to. He's pressing the envelope here, but I think at some point he's going to stop. We're already seeing intense negotiations going on behind the scenes, and there's also a meeting supposed to be held in Tehran next month to talk about Idlib. I don't think he's going to go kinetic. I mean, to use his direct military force against the Russians. If he did that, then all bets are off. But for now, we're seeing that he's just being bombastic. He's threatening a lot, but he's not going to push Putin.
You don't think?
I don't think he'll push Putin to the brink because Turkey needs Russia more than Russia needs Turkey.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
But that line in the sand that keeps being drawn, he keeps walking over it.
Yeah.
You know, for the last 2 weeks, you and I have been talking about this story, and there's a line, and we keep thinking he's not going to he crosses it. He's not going to he crosses it.
Well, that's because
I mean, so this morning when I woke up and I heard that the Russian Air Force is now being used against the militants that are backed by Turkey, I thought to myself, and I expressed it in the monologue just a moment ago, Russia's finally saying, look, we've had enough with this guy.
Well, that's true. That's true. They're basically saying that to Turkey that we're going to go ahead and take back Idlib, and in fact, the Syrians have taken back much of the territory. Erdogan's problem, he doesn't want another million, up to 1 million refugees flowing into the country, and that is a legitimate problem for him. But he's also got other ideas in mind. And here again, we're seeing that Putin is being very cautious. They need each other because Turkey is part of this multipolar world order that Russia has envisioned with China and with Iran.
What if there are back-channel conversations taking place between Erdogan and Washington, where Washington is egging him on?
Yeah.
Is that a possibility?
Oh, it's a total possibility because it's in Washington's interest to try to drive a wedge among Turkey, Russia, and Iran.
Of course, but would Erdogan bite?
Only to a point, but I don't think he's going to go over the limit. I don't think he'll go over the brink.
Does he feel like it behooves him to continue to manifest a relationship with Mr. Putin?
Oh, yeah, it's going to be absolutely necessary for him to do that because of the reliance on his economy is going down the toilet virtually because, and his opposition, he has increasing opposition from within. So he's got to be very, very careful. He has not delivered politically to his constituency on reforms that he has been promising since he was the prime minister.
So his situation in his own country is still somewhat tenuous?
Oh, yeah, it's very tenuous.
Is that why he's doing this? Because he wants to look like Mr. Macho?
He's trying to gather support. But from the Russian standpoint, from what I'm hearing from my sources, is that Putin is being cool. He's going to stand back and at the same time be adamant about protecting Assad's forces. But on the other hand, he also sees...
Yeah, but...
Again, it's the devil you know, then the devil you don't know.
Yeah, but what if Erdogan pushes him? What if Erdogan does go kinetic? What if Erdogan shoots down a Russian attack helicopter or something.
Then it's going to be a real problem. Ultimately, as I said earlier, Erdogan needs Putin more than Putin needs Erdogan at this point.
But Erdogan's highly unpredictable, Michael. I mean,
he's being bombastic.
Seems to me,
he's like Trump. He's being bombastic in order to gain leverage. He's trying to leverage both Washington and Moscow. But he can only go so far.
But he's not crazy.
He's cunning. He's cunning, and he sounds crazy. But he also has another agenda, and this is where he also serves Putin's purpose, in that he can be the bridge with 41 other Muslim countries, and this is in keeping with what Moscow has in mind in the long term.
Yeah.
And this is something we're also watching.
He's a catalyst. Okay, final thing. I think we're down to 30 seconds.
Okay.
Merkel and Macron, Germany's leader, France's leader, have both come forward just in the last half hour, and they said, we want to be part of the de-escalation efforts. We want to sit down with Erdogan and Mr. Putin and try and work this thing out.
Well, because they're concerned about the flow of refugees being, the spigot being released by Turkey and throwing them into Europe. He could release 3 million immigrants immediately into Europe, and they don't want that.